All right, everybody. Bam! Here we are. All right. Sorry, I had to let that play a little bit longer than I intended because once you get going with the Ted Nugent, it's hard to stop. Welcome, everybody, to Freaky Friday here on the podcast. We're joined by Dr. Jim, as usual, and our good buddy, Eduardo. Eduardo,
hey, what's up?
He got pulled into this almost against his will. And, no, we've been talking about catching up for a while, and Eduardo, super smart guy, astrophysicist, knows 12, 13 languages, awesome bass player. So
it's actually just 10, so...
just 10? Oh, okay. All right.
Merely 10.
That's right.
Merely 10. All right, so we'll get there. So as usual, gentle listeners, we're going to do some Q&A. Anything is fair game. Whatever you want to throw at us, please do. We'll answer as much as we can. If we don't know the answer, we will say we don't know or pretend to.
Or just skip the question.
We'll just skip the question altogether. But we did promise something special.
Wait.
Today,
may I lead with something special?
Please.
Okay, so today is my birthday.
No way, dude. I didn't even know.
It is. And one of the things that my kids gave me for my birthday was this lovely chameleon sweatshirt.
That's great, man.
And I've tried to mourn in private as much as possible and not to drag all of you into my mourning. But I like to think that this psychedelic chameleon sweatshirt is going to help me remember the good days with Bob.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Not as awful or the days where he was just a rotten, savage, mean lizard, which was really almost every day we had him. But that will help. It's going to help heal.
He put on his mean colors. So for people who don't know, first off, happy birthday, dude. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. So Jim had a pet chameleon named Bob for a number of years.
A couple years.
And he had some jealousy issues, right? He showed his mean colors every now and then.
Pretty much all the time.
And he came to a pretty sudden end, and actually, my understanding is a pretty gruesome end.
It was a bad week. Like
for everybody,
systems just fell apart. Right.
Yeah,
so,
and Jim's been carrying this burden with him for a while, so that's really nice, Jim, to hear that you had that from your killing. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, very good. Eduardo, what have you been up to, man? Maybe
So I've been up to the first concert in a year more, so that's it. Last month we've been touring with the band, and then we've been organizing the last for a bunch more shows, and that's pretty exciting to be back on the road. And
So, man, I'm gonna make sure we link your band in the show notes.
Oh yeah, sure, no worries.
So in case people do not know, Eduardo is the bassist in the band Nanowar of Steel. And in fact, they are quite a big deal. And we're going to try and get him over here in the United States at some point. Do you guys have any plans to come tour in the U.S. Anytime soon?
We are working on that. Our label is working on that. So it's something that might happen sometime in the future. It's...
Yeah, that would be awesome.
It's on the to-do list. It's not something plausible. It's gonna happen. I mean, we got a pretty big label now that's working out all of those things for us. So yeah,
right. Awesome.
It's gonna happen.
We will keep people updated. And of course, there's Summerfest here in Wisconsin, which would be the perfect venue. There's Tucker Carlson. This is going somewhere, by the way. Let me set the stage here. We're going to do our Q&A here, and I don't know, in a little bit, but we promised we wanted to just do something a little different and interesting, something of a reaction video. People have asked Jim and I to just comment on just various videos more and offer some reflections. So you're definitely going to get what you asked for, but probably not in the way that you asked for it. And let me give a little bit of background. We're going to be talking about an interview with Ted Nugent. I think we'll invite some good philosophical and moral reflections.
Okay.
And the reason this came up is Ted Nugent is on my iPhone, of course, because actually I saw Uncle Ted back in like 2000. He opened for Kiss, and the dude came out on stage on a gigantic buffalo. It was insane. It was insane. So I've always loved this music, right? So it's on my phone, and then my kids started loving it, especially the song "Great White Buffalo," which opened the stream. And then they're like, "Dad, can we see this on YouTube?" I'm like, "Sure, we'll go watch the Nuge." And then, of course, like interviews of him start popping up, right? So I clicked this one of him and Tucker Carlson, and I died laughing. The dude is like, you'll see. But at the same time I was watching this, I'm like, wow, this is like 5 minutes of content that would actually be really interesting to kind of just mull over and discuss and lead into like a philosophical Q&A, which we're going to do. So bear with us, gentle listeners. We're going to have some fun here. Eduardo, I don't think you've seen this, so you're coming in totally.
I have no
blind.
idea. No.
Yeah, no idea. Yeah, this is your fault, man. You're here. You're stuck now.
Cool.
Jim, did you watch this at all?
I did.
Okay, all right. So you know where we're headed. Yeah.
I prepped, right?
Any preliminary remarks?
No. It's worth a view, though. I'll say that.
All right. So, well, let me ask you this, Jim. Is it I know where I want to stop the first point, but if there's a place where either of you want to stop before, just like raise your hand and we'll do that. All right. Okay. And then gentle listeners, in the meantime, just put whatever questions you want for general Q&A. And I see a number have already come in, and we'll get to those here in a little bit. All right. First, somebody give me just a quick thumbs up. Can we hear the audio on this?
For a brand new episode of Tucker Carlson today, we spoke at great length to Ted Nugent, and it was an amazing conversation. Here's part of it.
I'm in a political firestorm. I've always been confrontational, especially regarding the Second Amendment and hunting rights. And I've never been uncomfortable when they attacked me. I go, so venison is, you don't recognize its value? What do you think deer are here for? If you don't eat them, what are they here for? On carrying a gun, I would be attacked for carrying a gun. I go, so by the way, venison and self-defense are perfect, and you're attacking me for carrying a gun and killing deer? What are you, nuts? And of course, they were all stoned. So I suppose the inclination would be uncomfortable when you're attacked, but I was so confident. You may have noticed this. I'm so confident that the weekend with my dad and brothers deer hunting was perfect. Yeah. Literally perfect.
Yes.
Balancing the herd, participating in God's miraculous creation as an asset to bring balance and thriving conditions, and training, aim small, miss small marksmanship. I'm a sheriff deputy for almost 40 years now. I train with Delta Force, Tucker. Get out of here. And so marksmanship and tactical capabilities to stop evil, could it be anything but perfect?
Yeah.
It's literally perfect. So my hunting and my guns are perfect. And the beatniks and the hippies would attack me for those things, because if you're comfortably numb, you think peace and love happened in spite of the Trail of Tears, in spite of the Bataan Death March. Here's a little battle cry I believe in. You Pearl Harbor me, I Nagasaki you.
All right, I want to pause it there. Eduardo, you said Ted Nugent isn't so popular over in
I never listened to him, so I don't know this guy. Basically, I don't know this guy. I just read the name sometimes. As I said, it's in political firestorm. I think it's most of the times, you see it popping up in these metal magazines. They say, "Oh, Ted Nugent said this, Ted Nugent did that," and that's why I heard. But
he makes the headlines a lot. Okay, I wanted to pause where I did. For a reason that Jim and I have discussed before, right? Sometimes I see the comments. I remember Cat Scratch Fever. You definitely have to know some of Nugent's songs, like Stranglehold and Cat Scratch Fever. He's pretty famous. Well, let's get right into it, because this is something like, look, let me just be frank, right? I would probably rather that Nugent was one of our political overlords today than pretty much anybody else. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't say things that strike me as being not exceptionally well thought out. And the one thing that really struck me in this conversation, and this is sort of like a litmus test for me, and this might get me in a little bit of trouble with some people here in America, but that's okay. And the one thing that's sort of a litmus test for me is when people just throw out lines regarding the dropping of atomic bombs on other countries.
Yes.
Right? Like this was like some really great thing celebrate. So like I'm laughing with Nugent, like the hunching. This is great. This is good. But it's just like this. It's a litmus test for me because it makes me wonder, like, if you've ever questioned as an American. And Eduardo, you're not an American, so you might not have this perspective. But this is a very American thing, right? It's like, yeah, we nuked the crap out of dudes. Hurrah, let's go. And it's long struck me that, like, if that's your just initial attitude to something like that, there is a deep and thorough, unexamined indoctrination that is running through you. And that's not even saying yet. I do think that the atomic bombings were unjustified, but I'm not getting there yet. I'm just saying, like, if it's never even occurred to you to question that, to just wonder, was it the right thing? Was it a good call to nuke these two major areas full of all the population that they had? If it's never even occurred to you that just maybe that might have been problematic, do you see how that would be something of a litmus test for me, right?
Something that's become like really important to me in the last year, 2 years, is just anyone commenting on like warfare in general who's never had like the balls to put the uniform on, right? Because of my father and now my son, right? Like I feel unable to really comment in a lot of ways on a lot of this stuff because I never put the uniform on, right? Mm-hmm. I never said I'm going to sign a contract and you could tell me to do things and I can't say no, right? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so like there's that. I'm always a little skeptical of like, conservatives who have never put the uniform on. But Dan Crenshaw can say all he wants, in my view, right? Okay. Because the guy put the uniform on, went all the way, and damn near got killed. Do you see what I mean? But Ted Nugent, as far as I know, has never been in battle, right?
I actually don't know. Yeah,
you know what I mean? Okay, you know what I mean?
But I would probably guess that's true.
Yeah, and another thing that I found interesting about that clip is, and I think you hinted at this, he mentioned how he had trained with Delta Force, right? Mm-hmm. Like for some of his marksmanship. Well, that kind of shows like how privileged a guy this is, right? Like the average person who wants to get good at tactical handguns and stuff, right, doesn't have the money and influence and prestige to get lessons from Delta Force. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's kind of showed like he wants to be this everyman, but you are dealing with a very privileged person.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, but that being said, and I agree with you on the moral sketchiness of dropping the atomic weapons, right? Mm-hmm. But I think this is his kernel point where I think he's like really, really correct. Okay, is I'm not an expert on geopolitics, but I just this last fall, like a year ago fall, I read a very interesting book on the history of nuclear deterrence, right? Mm-hmm. And it is very, very clear, like from the jump, the U.S., our policy vis-a-vis the Soviet bloc was, we are going to maintain first strike capability, right?
Yeah.
Like not just defense, like we are going to always have enough that we could, if we wanted to, like win one of these things, whatever would count for winning a nuclear war, right? Mm-hmm. And we would have first strike capability. And we cannot deny that probably kept World War III from happening, right? Because in terms of conventional weapons, they could have steamrolled Europe at almost any point, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was simply American nuclear capability that kept it from happening. At least that's a plausible read on the history of it, right?
And it's a common read, yeah. Uh-huh.
It's a common read. Okay, and so supposing that's correct, and just to go with the supposition, right? It's very disingenuous for anyone to be like who's enjoying all of the prosperity that has come in the West because of the preventing World War III that time, right? Mm-hmm. To some like all the people who have grown up like since 1989, after we basically arms raced, right, the Soviet Union into the dust, right? Mm-hmm. And has lived these very comfortable lifestyles have afforded them to worry about things like, opposing Ted Nugent on environmental issues and stuff like that, right? That somehow like just to say that it like the mere possession of nuclear weapons or the mere ability to sort of Nagasaki your Pearl Harbor is not morally ambiguous because our whole entire very, 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 very affluent lifestyle is predicated on that ability. Does that make sense? I'm not, as we've said in other podcasts recently, we might question whether the rationality of our entire lifestyle, right? Mm-hmm. we can't deny our whole lifestyle is predicated on American nuclear power.
Yeah. So I wanna bring
like
Eduardo,
right now today. Why have the Chinese not taken Taiwan? Because we can nuke the crap out of them, right?
Yeah, I wanna get Eduardo here in real quick, but two things I wanna state. One is that my first thing I want to bring up is, have you ever even just questioned the moral legitimacy of that? If not,
exactly.
then something's gone wrong, right? Two, I'll just state my positions right now. And I say this as a patriot and a common good conservative, right? He used to be liberal. I don't think the dropping of the bombs was morally justified. I also don't think that the American Revolution was morally justified, right? Now, these things happened, right? They happened, and because they happened, it doesn't mean that you don't owe an allegiance to America and you don't have duties to your country or something like that. So you have to be able to draw those distinctions. And I'll say why in a minute, but I want to hear Eduardo's perspective, because he wasn't born in America, didn't grow up in America. How do you look at this stuff? The
dropping of the A bombs on Japan. I don't know. So I would say, I sort of swing through all possible political positions during my lifetime. So it's I held very pro and very against position. At some point, so it's not like I've never questioned it. I used to be a very anti-American, anti-West, and
you used to be a Marxist at some point.
I was communist leaning, for a long time, sure. So, I would say, at the moment, if you ask me, I would say it wasn't totally unjustified in the sense that if you just count the number of deaths that might have happened in the case of the U.S. invading by land Japan, if they had to organize a full-scale invasion of Japan, that might result in more casualties. And by the way, no one. That's the other thing. We always talk about nuclear weapons because they strike us as there's this kind of technology, there's some kind of myth around them, and they can make with such a small thing can kill so many people at the same time. But there were bombings that resulted in many more deaths than actually the ones of Hiroshima, like the bombing of Tokyo with the firebombing, firebombed Tokyo, and the bombings in it was in Dresden or Leipzig I think it was Dresden in Germany. There was a town that was just filled with refugees coming from the east, where the Soviet army was marching, and so it was basically they were bombing refugees. German refugees. They were on the wrong side, so to say, but still. So there's, I don't know. I'm always, open for any kind of debate. But if we're talking about war, then you need to find the solution that results in the least amount of damage, because no matter how you move, then you're gonna do some damage once you're
Yeah,
so
that is the common response, right? My position is more strict. Is that one? There are always going to be situations, right, that are just intrinsically off limits, right? And killing non-combatants, innocent people, right? On the certainly on the scale that we did. And not just with the atomic bombings. I would say the same thing about the fire bombings too, right? Unjustified, for sure. It's not restricted to the atomic bombings. Those are just sort of the example that Ted Nugent brought up, which is why we're using it, right? Now, people will say exactly what you said, Eduardo, and was the main consideration. Is well, look, if we went in and tried to invade, in the sort of call it the old-fashioned way, probably many more people would die. And the answer is probably that's true, right? However, there's two considerations there. One is it does slip, I think, into a very problematic moral relativism from just a sort of utility calculus, which is bad news for any type of moral reasoning. But number two is we can't forget the conditions at the time that we were demanding unconditional or absolute surrender from Japan as well, right? And they were already seeking peace before that. So there was kind of a problem that we created in a sense, right, where they were trying to negotiate peace, but we were making some pretty crazy demands of what that peace would have to be. They weren't willing to accept that, and then we dropped the nukes, right? So it isn't just like it was either drop the nukes or invade by land. That's not what the conditions on the ground were. Japan was trying to reach peace agreements Now, one could say maybe we had to seek like absolute surrender for somebody for like Germany and Hitler. I think that's probably a more reasonable position. But for Japan, I don't think that's there. And people seem to kind of forget that consideration as well. And yeah, just one more point. And people will bring up, well, the common response from there is sort of the principle of double effect, right? Well, we weren't intending to kill the innocent people. We're just intending to either attack the combatants or people who are closely associated with that or factories of war. But that's ridiculous in this situation, right? The analogy that somebody gave once I think is good is like it's like saying that you're going to kill a spider on somebody's forehead by using a sledgehammer. Right. And just it's ridiculous. Like there's no legitimate situation that you could ever say, well, I was just intending to kill the spider. Right.
No, but that was not the point. I mean, they knew that they were trying to kill innocent to just, get Germany. I mean, for all that matters, it's the same reason why they bombed Dresden, because they wanted the morale of the German people to fall down. And the same thing.
And that's right. That's exactly right. Is that our intention was not trying to use the doctrine of double effect. That's what other people have tried to say to justify
no, sure.
it. Our intention was what you said, Eduardo. It was to completely demoralize. You're right about that.
I don't think double effect works here, and because I think so. I let's say an intruder comes to my home, and I have a handgun, and I think I can use double effect to take actions that I know are going to kill him, right? Because if by a miracle he survived, but he was still subdued, I could still say my end was met.
That's right.
Like I shoot him through the forehead, right? And he's immobilized, and by some miracle he survives, right? I would still say my end's been met. I wouldn't regret his surviving, right? Whereas if like what's going through my head is I want you dead because you should be dead, that I can't use double effect there, right? Okay, right. Whereas I can say I know you're going to be die. I know you're going to die, but I wish you wouldn't, right?
Right.
But that's okay. Whereas, I think if like the bomb goes off in Nagasaki and like nobody died, our ends were not met, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Okay. But I think one thing that has to be like borne in mind. I'm torn on this. I'm absolutely torn on this issue.
That's part of why I brought it up. I'm torn in certain ways too. I would say my weak leaning. I should have said this. My weak leaning is it was not justified. It's my weak leaning.
And sort of my big picture is just this is kind of a general theme with it. It's evidence that Western civilization took a deeply wrong turn at some point when it seemed inevitable that this had to be done. Okay. Do you see what I mean? Anyway, and so and this is sentimental, but probably if they don't drop that bomb, I'm never born. Right. Because like my grandfather probably would have, like, he was, catching the tail end of World War II, right? And he probably would have gone to Japan and probably would, good chance he doesn't come back, right? But anyway, I think one thing to bear in mind too is one of many things that led us to do this, right, was what happened at Okinawa, right, which was our first time of fighting on actual Japanese soil, and the level of horror that they saw happen on Okinawa was like, even though like the Pacific Theater in World War II may have been like one of the most horrific wars ever fought, right? And even among that, it horrified what in light of what happened there, right? And just the number of Japanese civilians that were simply thrown off cliffs and stuff, right, by their own people, right, just to keep them from falling into American hands and things like that, and just to maximize the horror of it, right? This kind of like nihilistic death cult that had happened.
Right.
So I think that was part of the calculation, is that like people are going to die here, right? And the level of just absolutely just hellish horror that's going to go on, right, if we do it by way of invasion, as opposed to this more, and once again, I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but this more like clinical way of dropping a nuke, right? You know what I mean? There was a sense, I think, that this might be actually the more merciful way to do it to the Japanese people, right? Even though, I think you're right that we were making a certain type of demands that they almost could not agree to.
Right. It is using something that is intrinsically evil to get an outcome that you think is good. Right.
Yeah, but it seems like we had gotten ourselves in a position where there may not have been anything but intrinsic evils available. Right. Which shows to me something went wrong with civilization. Right. Like Like obviously this doesn't come in a vacuum. Right. Where it was like everything was fine. And then we had this
it's the frame of a war. I mean, it's very hard to apply this kind of reasoning, when you're at war, because, I mean, we don't apply this kind of reasoning in normal times. Like people get crazy right now with COVID times and there's no war going on, but still, the rhetoric and the amount of evil, like sheer evil, has been done to people for not complying or for doing some kind of things to me striking. And then there's nothing, not even remotely close to the horrors that were, or to the dangers that were there in World War II. So I'm not surprised. I mean, on the other hand, aren't we demanding too much, like from human rationality at some point? Like, we have to, after 4 years of fighting, you need to be,
that's
to
my
completely
point,
disconnect from that. And it's not like you're coming from. It's like very easy to talk about this right now, but after 4 years, and someone comes and tells you, look, you have the option to end it tomorrow, and it's gonna cost this an amount of lives, or it can go on for an undetermined amount of time.
This is why, for me, I think with the Second World War, Western civilization kind of quit making sense. Right.
Yeah. Right.
And something had been revealed about Western civilization,
about
right?
The deep irrationality running through.
Yeah, the deep irrationality running through Western civilization.
Yeah, and to Eduardo's point, I mean that's absolutely right. Right, but there's a difference between something being understandable and something being morally permissible and acceptable. Like, you can understand why these decisions were made. And then you can and part of one of the best reflections I've seen on this actually comes from Anscombe. Have you read her paper, Mr. Truman's Decree? Right. So Elizabeth Anscombe, famous philosopher, she's at Oxford, and Oxford is about to give Truman like an honorary degree for what he did in the war. And Anscombe is like, hold on, guys. Like, let's actually take the time to think about if this dude actually deserves this honor that we're about to give him. And yeah, she talks about pretty much all the points that we've brought up, right? She considers possible counterfactual scenarios. She does look at the sort of political conditions. All right, it does seem like there were other alternatives here. Maybe they wouldn't have worked. They would have worked or not. Then goes through the different accounts of moral reasoning. And at the end of the day, she comes down really hard against Oxford, right? She's like, you guys should not be honoring this man for what he did, even if you thought that we've benefited in many ways from the decision. This is not something that I think what she's saying more than anything else, Jim, actually would agree with. He says, like, we should not continue this irrationality, right? There was a deep irrationality that led up to this. Yeah. And we should not continue this irrationality. Right. Yeah. I'll link that paper for people who I don't want to spend too much time on this. Yeah. And we'll tend to questions here. But
once again, I will say this is Elizabeth Anscombe is someone who did not have skin in that game. Right. And I just wonder if her kid was on one of those boats.
Yeah. Right? And I get that. Right. So like Crenshaw put on the uniform, but I'm not willing to say that Crenshaw can say anything because he put on the uniform.
No, what I mean though is like kind of a different issue, but I think I don't want to hear how glorious power is from a guy who never put the uniform on.
Yeah, sure. Right.
Because he's never had to face the real downside of the expression of power.
Yeah, right? Yeah. That's
whereas Dan Crenshaw has, right?
Right.
My old man did, right?
Yeah, 100%. All right. Well, that was pretty much the only thing I wanted to pick out of the Nugent thing. Was there anything else that struck you guys?
No, it's funny. The rest is pretty funny.
It's funny. Yeah, if you guys just want a good laugh, just go through that. And that would be
here's something though. Okay, he does at one point. He starts listing evil things, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like I think he says, he says like Venezuela, like Cuba, and then he says like the Democrats, right? Okay, and it's sort of like this is the sort of thing where, what did you mean there? Did you mean like I'm putting the American Democratic Party, in the same category as Che, right? Mm-hmm. Or do you mean like, hey, Democrats, who are you supporting, right? You know what I mean? And I guess like that's a really bad ambiguity, right? And that's the kind of ambiguity that really, really polarizes and like really, really feeds crazy people. And you can find it from both sides. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's the sort of thing where I wish we were more careful, right, with that sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course, right? And I mean, this is just kind of what you get from, I guess, political pop star talking heads.
Exactly, yeah.
But I mean, yeah, you're right. And like, look, I have almost zero sympathies with the policies of the Democratic Party these days.
Of course, yeah.
But yeah, let's be a little bit more subtle. But that's to Eduardo's point. I mean, like, where should our expectations be these days? Like, Mine are about as low
That's
as
pretty low.
about as low as a cockroach. Here.
It's I have no expectations anymore. But
Right.
Yeah,
if the scientists failed us this bad, I'm not expecting. I cannot expect much more from politicians. It's very.
Yeah. No,
that would be very irrational.
Yeah, I'm not defending like the Democrats.
No, I mean I understand what you mean. It's you shouldn't put them on the same. Of course they are not. Of course they're not.
And it's the sort of thing that just what I'm sure that quote was picked up by some left-wing organization. See, Ted Nugent says Democratic Party is genocidal maniacs, right? Well, he may not have been saying that, okay, but he didn't go out of his way not to say it. Right? Right. You know what I mean?
But it's like when there's this literal thing. All the time, it's like everything is Hitler, right? This reduction on the left side, and then you go told this is
the ad Hitlerium fallacy, I call it, right?
Yeah. Well, and Nugent's just, I guess, a good example to say that that type of language isn't exclusive to the left, even if it is almost, even if it's more prominent there, right? And if nothing else, we can say for people who are more conservative minded, hey, we can do better than that, right? And we should do better than that.
Right.
Good. All right. Should we take some questions? Eduardo, what have you been working on aside from the music stuff? You still doing machine learning?
I'm doing machine learning. I'm working on satellite data, so I don't see much.
So, Eduardo,
do
you make your living as a musician, or is that still a side thing for you?
No, it's like it could be, but I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
First of all, I enjoy the work I'm doing. I enjoyed it when I was working in academia, but now even more. So,
do you worry that if you did make your living as a musician, that it would kind of make fun not fun?
No.
Yeah. See, anytime I'm tempted to open a jiu-jitsu gym in the town I live in, I always worry that it's gonna, if I turn it into a job, right? Where I have to worry about paying the rent on a building or something, it's going to ruin it, right?
Yeah. That I'm not sure. About music, I would do that full time. It's I'm not doing it full time, but it's almost full time because it's.
And I think it depends on it depends on the aspect for sure, right?
Yeah.
So I can tell you that I had guitar instructors who said don't make this your career because it will make the thing you love not fun. But that was only because they weren't touring and making music. They had to teach brats like me. Right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you that about teaching philosophy, right? It's a good way to make fun out of it.
Right. If you could just write books and that just
look, if I could just train jiu-jitsu all day, no problem. But running a small business on top of it, right? That I would worry about. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And right. Yeah. Yeah. So there's I think from the friends that I know, Jim, like Sam.
Yeah.
He would say, I think he would say at the end of the day, it's absolutely 1,000 times more worth it. He was previously electrical engineer, right? So he was electrical engineer. Then he jumped to full-time gym ownership. And there's definitely aspects of it that are annoying and not fun, but he ain't going back in the other direction anytime.
Oh yeah. Right, and also I have a very easy job.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Here it's 2:30 in the afternoon, and here we are.
All right. Let's take some questions, and I know Eduardo's been doing some stuff on the old COVID front, so I want to make sure we get to that at some point.
No, we can do it next time.
We'll do that. All right, we'll do a separate stream on that. Let's do some questions.
Yeah.
Here is a question, Jim. This is going to be mostly for you, but we'll jam around on it. He wants to know, what are the major flaws of panpsychism in your view? And Jim, if you wouldn't mind, just for everybody in the audience, give us maybe an overview of that position.
I think panpsychism in all its various forms, I think you did say it all amounts to the notion that mind, in some sense of mind, whether it's consciousness or rationality, is a fundamental feature of the world, and it's not compartmentalized to individuals, right? And if you say, what are the major flaws of panpsychism in your opinion, I would say I'm not sure there are major flaws to it. Okay. And I think the kinds of criticisms I made of panpsychism in my first book, I don't really stand behind anymore. I think they were pretty facile, right? My main worry about panpsychism is a lot of people calling themselves panpsychists still want to claim to be some kind of philosophical naturalist. And I think once you've turned to panpsychism, I think the naturalist, non-naturalist distinction has been basically sublated or diffused, right? It's not clear that there's such a distinction being made anymore, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just starting to kind of like rethink panpsychism, and I'm starting to see, I think, a lot of classical philosophers really would fall under the general rubric of panpsychism.
Yeah.
So I'm not really prepared to criticize it at this point.
Well, I think I know we've talked about this before. I just have a couple thoughts on it as well. Is if the thesis is just that you think somehow mind is fundamental, then I'm going to have little to disagree with on that, right? But then if you're right to the point about naturalists and naturalism, Jim. It has been interesting. You're more in philosophy of mind, but even in philosophy of metaphysics and religion, to see how exotic naturalism has gotten the past 20, 30 years, right? It's like reductionism, physicalism, they're definitely on the way out. I mean, the new Phil surveys came out, it's shipping, dude. That ship
it's over 50% of philosophers claim to be non-materialist.
Right. It's going. It's really not people realize this worldview ain't going to work anymore. But they're still kind of not willing to give up the naturalist project. So now they're just kind of bringing in all these what would previously have been considered unacceptable and exotic entities, right? And that's your point, right? It's at what point is this even meaningfully naturalism anymore, right?
And I'll say this is okay. So if you take your standard, gosh, it's even funny to say this now, mainstream versions of naturalism, but there are now, or of panpsychism, right? Like Phil Goff's or P.F. Strawson's or something like that.
Koch, those guys,
Yeah, they're still built on the basic post-Galilean Cartesian view of mind as qualitative subjectivity. Okay. And so I still think they carry all of the problems inherent in that they have not really questioned the basic Cartesian package, right? They're just all of these views, whether they're dualistic or they're physicalist, they're panpsychist, they're just Taco Belling, right? The basic dualist Cartesian package that was the solution to the problem that came with the Galilean physics in the 17th century. Okay. And in as much as that basic thing goes unquestioned, philosophy of mind is as an absolute smile on a dog dead end in my view, right? Okay. And so that's why my view is these thinkers like Husserl, right? Like Heidegger, like Wittgenstein, that are laboring to run it back and try to see how we could think this through without falling into that trap. I think those are the interesting views. Okay. So I do think your mainstream versions of panpsychism are going to end up being silly, where electrons have something like subjective states, right? Because they're still thinking of mind as individuated subjectivity. It's just there's more minds like that now, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Eduardo, any thoughts?
I'm trying to elaborate, but I don't have anything to add. I'm not aware of these views, so I refrain from.
If you start talking physics, I'll let you run too, Eduardo. Right?
Oh, no worries. I don't think it's coming.
Yeah, the way I would say, Jim, I'll just agree with you. With some of the mainstream accounts, or even particular accounts, it's going to be you have to specify it before I can really critique it, right? Because panpsychism is now an umbrella term, right? There's a lot of different theories of panpsychism. But yeah, I think a lot of them will still run into a lot of them. My major critique now is that they tend to relocate the problem generally to the microphysical rather than solve the problem.
I agree.
That's my critique.
Right. And it's still the same Cartesian problem, right?
Exactly. Right. Okay. So you just move the problem. You haven't solved the problem, right?
You haven't solved the problem. And once again, I know I've been harping on this book on the show here lately, but Husserl's account of this in The Crisis of European Sciences is just brilliant. It really is. Yeah. And so in general, I would say I'm some kind of panpsychist, but I actually think every smart person to the 17th century was, right?
Yeah.
Okay. In this really broad sense of panpsychism. I'm going to eventually detail this, right? But I agree with you, on the modern version, like what you have in the mainstream versions today of panpsychism, they're just taking the basic Cartesian package and they're transferring it to the electron. Right.
Right. Yeah. Good. Do you have a favorite book from a panpsychist that you would commend to the audience there, Jim? I know Eduardo read Phaser's book not recently, and Phaser does take some swipes at panpsychism in that book. But
I think Philip Goff's book Galileo's Error is brilliant. Like I think like one, he's seen what something went wrong here in the 17th century and how we dealt with the new physics, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's running. I think he's almost historically aware, almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I think it's an excellent introduction to philosophy of mind overall, right? And I think it's a very, very good treatment of panpsychism. I think what he does with information distribution research in neuroscience is just brilliant and fascinating. Okay, so I highly recommend that book. I think it's a great book, right?
Nice.
At the end of the day, I think it is still a piece of modern philosophy of mind and carries all the liabilities of that. Mm-hmm. There's also a paper by a guy named Rupert Sheldrake that was published in Consciousness Studies called "Is the Sun Conscious?" Right?
Oh yes,
yeah,
Star-Lord.
It's Sheldrake's paper is very, very interesting, and it's a very, very good, concise, clear presentation of the general case for panpsychism. Yeah,
interesting. All right, let's keep moving along there. This one's for you, Jim. This is a follow-up from last time. Octa says, when you're critiquing Socratic logic, which is the logic textbook by Peter Kreeft, a few weeks back, you mentioned it had some technical problems as well as typos. Could you enumerate on some of those?
Yeah, Actus. Gosh, I have to go back and look it up in there. So let me be a responsible adult, and I'll do that. But I'd have to get it out and look it up. So.
I'm trying to see. Usually, I have the book in view somewhere, but we won't do that now. Speaking of,
I do remember too, the problems that people were claiming in there. Like this was way down the line, like internecine struggle among Aristotelian logicians over how to interpret something. You know what I mean? So. I think probably at the level of the semi-popular use of the book, these are things that are probably nearly immaterial, right? But I'll go back and revisit that.
Yeah, and I expect that everybody's at least taken one discrete math course since our last conversation.
I would hope so.
Eduardo's got a big background in math. Eduardo, do you have any tips or advice for the audience for those who want to improve their mathematical and logical reasoning?
Yeah,
No, seriously, yeah. Give some advice, yeah.
I have no advice. I mean, I think as everything, you sharpen your skills when you use them, and mathematics is you can be on a very theoretical level, and discuss about theorems and stuff, which you have to do at some point. But I guess that the more that you benefit from using mathematics is when you actually use it. So just apply it and try to understand why it works when it works and how it works and how we can sharpen your mathematical reasoning by actually applying it. I mean, for at least that's the way I do it. It's with programming or with mathematics in general. It's if you really want to grasp a concept, and it's the same thing with languages. Right. So if you really want to speak a language and understand what's the the concepts or some words, why are they spoken the way they are, or just speak the language without thinking about it, then you need to practice a lot. And same things with mathematics. I think you get more benefits from it when you start using it. So exercise, I guess you might say.
I agree 100%. There's
music too, right?
There's
music, everything.
There's very good evidence that your one class in formal logic does you almost no good,
right?
In terms of actually improving your reasoning skills, it has to become a lifestyle, right?
You have to. I think, at least for me, I benefited from it a lot when I was actually, solving mathematical problems at university.
Yeah. But you went right in, you took logic, and then you were in a world of discrete ideas, right? Yeah.
Same thing with mathematics. I mean, you can just read a pure maths book, and then you read it, and you cannot really grasp why is there such thing as a differential calculus.
A few years ago, I got a used copy of a college textbook called Calculus as a Liberal Art.
Okay.
And it taught you the calculus through the history of mathematics.
Okay.
And it started with a basic Greek number theory and worked your way all the way up through until you worked the Leibniz-Newton debates and all that. Yeah. And you learn the calculus through the history. And I tell you that kind of, man, that upped my game intellectually. Just understanding the history of the West better.
Right.
In doing that. So but once again, I haven't practiced calculus, so I can't sit down and do anything with it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a related question I think we should just pull up. I just saw this one come in. We're going to go out of order. Samuel says, why is Bayes' theorem so prominent in contemporary philosophy of religion and philosophy in general? It seems kind of weird to me to treat philosophy as a type of math. Yeah, this is a good question. Jim and I have talked about these Bayesian tennis matches, and I actually got a conversation with somebody the other day, and I tend to be skeptical, as I think you are, Jim, of some of these probability assignments, right? That we see in these sorts of debates. So, like, sometimes you'll have philosophers say, "Well, this hypothesis has a 99.97% probability," right? And it's like, how are you getting these assignments, right? It just seems ridiculous to me. So
let's set the prima facie, probability of God's existence at 0.6.
Yeah, or the resurrection, or this or that, or naturalism from evil, or something like that. Like, they'll set these specific assignments, and I'm like, how on earth are you getting? And I've never been convinced by that. I will say this, however, I think that it's still useful just using like the general tool of Bayesian probability to just ask from a reasonable or broad degree of expectation. What is the likelihood that I would expect this data given this hypothesis? And what is the likelihood that I would expect this data without that hypothesis? And now we're going to be working largely off intuitions, right? Yes. But I think this is still a useful tool because, for example, I'll give the one that I like. Like if I and this is from Tim McGrew. He does a lot in probability theory, right? If I'm walking in the woods and I find a cabin and it looks abandoned because the door is hanging off and there's moss, but I go inside the cabin, I discover that there's a cup of hot steeping tea. I immediately revise my hypothesis to this is an occupied cabin. Right. Why? Well, because I just know, right? Like by like the light of reason that I'm far more likely to discover a cup of hot steeping tea on the hypothesis this cabin is occupied rather than the hypothesis this cabin is abandoned. Now, I don't know like what the probability is. I have no idea. Like, what is the probability that we'll find a cup of tea in any cabin? I have no idea, right? Yeah. I have no idea. Maybe we could use a frequentist approach and try and figure that out, but I generally don't know.
But here we go, though. Here we go, right? Is it occupied or is it you're just not the first person there that day, right? And so now we're like into, what's his name? The guy that I had the argument with in my last paper.
Paul Draper.
Draper. Like, it's not, it's like it's about what's the best available explanation, not like the intrinsically most probable, right?
Right.
And so now we got all sorts of things we're gonna have to like intuitively set probabilities to, right? You know what I mean? Right, and that's why I think it just gets out of hand, and we're not talking about reality anymore. Yeah.
And I definitely want to bring Eduardo in this because this is a general math question. But what I want to say is there's nothing wrong generally with working off intuitions here, right? Because I think intuitions are valid. I mean, we use them morally and epistemically all the time, but they can be defeated. So what you need to do in a case like that, for me not to claim that T is evidence in favor of this hypothesis, is you have to give me some reason for that would defeat that intuition, and maybe there is one. But otherwise, I still think that's a valid move to make. Yeah, Eduardo, come on in here.
There's just so much to say, but I would say that like Bayes' theorem, just to jump on that, it's the nice thing about it is that when you're quoting some kind of probability or likelihood of something to be true, of some statement, or degree of how would you say it? It's like small degree of belief in some kind of statement. Is that you're actually factoring out what your hypothesis is. So what are your priors? What's there's some priors, so there's something that you know about the world beforehand,
right?
And this is sort of shaping. It's already influencing what's the likelihood of some other statement, because there's no such thing as a statement out of the blue. I mean, usually,
that's right.
So you always need to work out maybe you have some hypothesis. Or you have some, like in mathematical distribution, we say, okay, I'm assuming that my variable is a Gaussian distribution, for example, or I know this and this properties because it's just an observation. And so, but in general, the good thing, I mean, the powerful thing about Bayes' theorem is that it's making so clear, establishing a clear relationship between the outcome and your prior hypothesis, which is very true because people tend to forget about this. Like people quote numbers without the context, and so every statistics, every number has to be put in context. Of course, what's the so what are your hypotheses first of all, and what's happening somewhere else? So I would say this is the reason why, and that's a very good. Like to answer the second part of the questions, like it's weird to me to treat philosophy as a type of math. I wouldn't say that you would treat philosophy as a type of math, but you're using mathematics as a language, like we would use logic, to make your statements in a very definite way. It's very clear. So this is, if I'm writing an equation, and this is, I can write term to terms what it leads to, and I can see what's the evolution. So I can go from A to B in a very clear way. I'm not saying that you have to do this all the time. There's many times you cannot do this, and you just need to proceed by reasoning. But in general, like in sciences and philosophy, or I don't know, social sciences as well, you can like say, okay, if I make this assumption and then I have this assumption, and I think that this, this function has some kind of behavior, then I can sort of extrapolate and see what this leads to in a very clear way. And it's there's no, you can play around with words much less than you would do in a normal discourse. If you have some argument, you can say, look, this leads to this prediction, or if I'm going along this path, then that this kind of thing must happen to these variables, or I should observe this kind of phenomenon, whatever that is. Again, this is not to say that you should use mathematics in every context, because you can be very badly misled. And
we've seen this recently, haven't we? Right?
I don't know what you're talking about, but
because people see fancy math, they're like, "Oh, this must be legitimate," right? Yeah.
And on the issue of Bayes' theorem in philosophy, and as Pat knows, man, I as just a sort of a part of the game.
I love that you know that it's a game that you love to play.
I love it. Yeah, it's like my weak spot. I'm doing it again. I know I'm doing it now. Right. I wish I wasn't doing it. Right. But here I am doing it, like writing papers on it. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And even though I know it's the wrong thing to do. Right. But the thing is debate always becomes like we always end up just arguing over what we set as being in the relevant background. Okay. So I think what it ends up showing is the debate isn't the first order issue. It's this higher order thing always. It's always what's in the background. Like, what is the given background? That's where the real philosophical debate is, right? And if only we had that set, we could math our way through it. But here's the problem. Like, here's like the recalcitrance of being, right? Like, human life is complicated. And there's always this like unargued for background that we have to like presume, and when we can't, that's where philosophy breaks out, right? And maybe it might end up being irresolvable, right? But that's where we need to be, is in the background, not like inevitably the real issue is going to be there, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's, Eduardo mentioned experience, right? Is like, if we're going to have reasonable degrees of expectation, we need experience, right?
Yeah. But that's just to go a little bit further on this. I remember the paper you sent me on the Castro consensus was completely based on Bayesian reasoning. Like when we have a consensus in a scientific community, and we say that scientific consensus is healthy, we are assuming that it's healthy, and it's highly unlikely for so many experts to be wrong at the same time, under the assumption that there's no political pressure. And this is a very strong assumption that you cannot really say that all the time. So you need to discriminate the kind of scientific consensus depending on the hypothesis. And it's a very simplistic toy model of the world, but it's sort of explaining in a very clear way. And it's not just by putting words after another. You can clearly see in mathematics. That's like, if you have these assumptions and then you work them out coherently, you end up with this conclusion. And so if the assumption is there is no independence of, there is some political pressure, then I cannot conclude that the consensus I reached in science is some kind of is a good proxy to the actual truth of the issue,
right?
And it's unrelated to the external political pressure. And there, I remember that paper. You see it clearly. It's a very good application of that.
It is, yeah, it is. We should do a talk. Eduardo, when we do our next one, we'll maybe we can bring that paper in and discuss it.
Yep.
All right, let's keep moving along here. Good questions. Thought I was going to be calming the brain down here on Friday, but all right, let's I saw one I wanted to highlight here real quick. It was on everyone's favorite nominalism. You mentioned nominalism facing a regress problem during yesterday's stream. Oh, did I? Don't hold me accountable for what I say on a prior stream, please. Could you elaborate more on that? Are you saying that it's self-defeating? I mean, this is kind of a well-known issue, right? It goes back at least to, I think, Bertrand Russell, right? Is that the first guy who definitely not the first guy, but he's one who made this objection fairly prominent issue for nominalism, right? Nameism, if you want to call it that. But yeah, I mean, the way we can think about it, let's go back to Hume, right, to see what the sort of general commitment here is. And Hume's going to say, you know, he's arguing against universals or general ideas on some interpretations of Hume, always with the important asterisk there. And Hume's going to say, you know, try to conceive a triangle in general, right? That's what Hume's going to say. He's going to say, which is neither isosceles nor scalene, which doesn't have length or any of that. And Hume will say, you'll soon perceive the absurdity of all the notions of abstraction and general ideas. Yeah. That's Hume's argument, right? And yeah, I think let's just, if we take it step by step, I think it's a mistake on multiple levels Hume's making here. One, he fails to distinguish between understanding or conceiving and perceiving or imaging, right? So of course we can't picture or image a triangle without engaging a sense faculty. And then we have the picture is always bound, right? It's always isosceles or scalene. But that's not what understanding is. That's not what conceiving is. And Hume's sort of overlooking the difference between intellect and sense, right? And they're very distinct. Because we can obviously conceive of triangularity by understanding, not picturing what is common to all particular triangles, be they isosceles or scalene. And like, of course we can, right? We do it all the time. So that's the first mistake of Hume, I would say. I'm sure Jim has other things to say, but I'll to make one or two more points. Next is, like, if we're going to deny our understanding of universals and by like general ideas like triangularity, right? Yeah, I do think it's self-defeating, because then we can have every right to ask, why do we call such particulars, right? This triangle or that triangle by a common name or a general idea, just triangle. And I mean, what other reason could somebody say, aside from the fact that they share characteristics in common, like triangularity, triadularity, etc., right? So as soon as we admit to understanding those characteristics, nominalism is defeated, right? And if they want to just bite the bullet and say that we don't have an understanding of these characteristics, and there's no basis for calling particular things triangles in the first place, but that's what Hume needed to get his argument off in the first place. So he's not even going to get his argument started. So that's how I would start to respond to Hume's issue. As far as the regress problem, yeah, even if you say, well, we just call them by a common name because they resemble each other. Well, the general idea of resemblance is itself a universal, right? So we just kick the problem up, and then you'll just kind of have this vicious regress problem if you keep trying to do that. So yeah, I don't think nominalism is sustainable. I think it can be answered in various ways, and if you try and ride it out, it ultimately ends up sort of shooting itself in the foot. So I'll pause there. You guys have
No, I mean, I agree. Though I've recently quit using the term universals, okay, for reasons that Hegel brings up. Like, he thinks that kind of talk makes the universal a particular, right? Because as soon as I say universals, we start to think of concepts as like individuated entities, right? And then you get all these puzzles the nominalist brings up about, you know, how does universal relate to the particular, because it's a thing outside of it. You know what I mean? And so it's like, and, you know, the way Hegel will put it is, you know, like for him, the realism nominalism considered worry is whether or not reality has an actual logical structure that we discover, or is it all just our projection onto it, right? And so for him, the nominalist is someone, the Humean is someone, the skeptic is someone who just denies there's a logical structure to reality, right?
All right.
And Hegel's view is that, well, this is self-defeating, right? So like you Hume are clearly making arguments that you're clearly claiming to have traction in a real world, right? And unless there's a logical structure to that real world, those real arguments aren't going to have traction there, right? So I think for that reason, yeah, it's self-defeating, right? Do you see what I mean? And so I think like the claim that there isn't a logical structure to reality that we get to, right? If you're going to make an argument for it, right, is self-defeating, right? Because there wouldn't be arguments to get anywhere if that were the case, right?
Yeah.
Right. Or they would all be inductive, but then we have to, I think, in order for deduction to work, there have to be deductively valid laws of induction, right? We can't justify induction inductively, right?
Right. Yeah, and we know Hume's will puzzles of
Famously,
induction too. Yeah.
famously,
Yeah. Eduardo, anything to add to any of that?
No, I'm sorry. I'm completely unaware of the issue. So
yeah, these are just the obscure debates and perennial debates. But yeah, here's a practical one. How do you guys handle ideological conflict with family going into the holidays, liberal or conservative politics or whatever? Yeah.
Just don't take the bait, dude. Just watch the football game. Eat grandma's pie, and maybe bite your tongue. I mean, you love these people more than you love these issues. So just that's been my take forever on it, right?
I've pretty much been banned by all my family that thinks differently from me at this point. So I'm like literally, like I don't even have this opportunity anymore. And it wasn't because I mouth off at holidays. It's just because like they can't stand certain people that I think differently than them on particular issues. So and this is a really sad thing, right? Like the deep rifts that happen in families because people just can't like get past it. You know what I mean? It's a sad. So I really don't have this issue anymore because like aspects of the family just don't come together anymore because they can't.
Yeah. But I think if you find yourself in a situation where like your uncle's going off about politics again, and you don't agree,
it's always the uncle.
Yeah. Just maybe just let him have it. Just let him have it. Like, how important is it for you to like be right in that situation? I mean, maybe it's just more important that your mom gets to have Christmas without anybody fighting, right?
Are you that much of a peacemaker at your holiday gatherings?
No, we don't talk. I mean, I don't know. We don't talk politics. When we do, we tend to talk about issues we all agree on. And so I think like the last political fight we had were maybe 15 years ago. So we dropped it.
That's really good.
But it's big. I mean, I would say most of the family is on the same political side. I'm not on their side, but I don't care. So whatever. I don't really care. It's fun. There's a few things we all agree on. It's like this COVID craziness, and then I got pretty much everyone on my side. It wasn't that hard, but they were really leaning against. But yeah.
Excellent. What about you, Jim? Is this how like politically divided is your family? Because mine is I'm kind of I'm definitely in a minority position in like the broad sweep of my family. But what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we, like Jen and I would be political outliers, not deep outliers in our families. Like our families, I suspect we don't all vote the same way, but we're all kind of basically living like fairly traditional lifestyles, right? So you don't have really, really big ticket disagreements. You know what I mean? And like my dad, was he was a blue collar Vietnam vet Democrat, right? You know what I mean? And so, that's very different from like woke, right? You know what I mean? It's like my side of the family is like very typical, like Wisconsin Rust Belt people, right? Okay. And
yeah, like blue dog Democrats.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. You know what I mean? So that's like, I don't know. I'm like one issue from being that, really. Okay. You know what I mean? But and so like there's not just there's disagreement, but there's not like massive like worldview kind of disagreement.
Yeah, and I mean that really is like most of my mom's side of the family, or like those old school like kind of also like Reagan Democrats they call them sometimes. And like that's it was nice, right? Because like you have disagreements here or there, or they would have disagreements with each other, but it's not over like huge paradigm shifts like it is today. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly. And my wife's family too. It's like we occupy the same universe, right? And there have been issues over the years like homeschooling and stuff like that had to be smoothed out, right? But we just basically said it's just not worth hating each other over, right?
Right. Yeah. So just watch the football game, eat grandma's pie.
Eat grandma's pie. You're giving this to grandma.
Right? Jacob just picked up your book, Jim, Mind, Matter, and Nature.
Cool, man. Thanks, Jake. You made me $1. But keep Catholic University Press open, right? That's important. So thank you for the purchase, and thank you for like supporting the book, right?
Is there anything in that book, because obviously it was written like what, 10 years ago now, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it was published in 2013. So I'm writing that 2011. Yeah, 2013. Yeah.
So obviously ideas evolve, but
totally.
are there any like major ones of saying, hey, don't really take this section as seriously anymore?
I'm far less sympathetic to Searle's Chinese room argument as I was there, and it plays a huge role in that book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just in general, I think I was too dualist in that book, right? And so I'm much less so now, right? Like much has been rethought for me, right? I still think the Thomistic position that I'm sketching in that book is plausible and defensible, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not really my position today, though. Do you know what I mean? But I do think it's a plausible, defensible position in the Thomistic neighborhood, right?
Right.
Groovy.
All right, we're hit the hour here on Freaky Friday. Anything else you guys want to mention?
Someone asked a fitness question about who was it? It was about what was my
let's find that.
What is it? Antonio Poblaki. Yeah. So he asked, "What's my cold exposure plan for the winter?" I don't really have a hardcore plan for it. I've been doing the cold shower thing in the warm months here because it's not cold outside. But now for the winter, I'm just going to try to work out outside with as little clothing as I can stand, right? For as much as the winter as I can stand it. Yeah. And for me, it's gotten to like I think there is some health benefit to doing this, but for me, it's just gotten, I like it. And I like having the full range of human experience. And I do find when I'm like out jogging in a tank top and it's 30 degrees out, that there's a kind of like really sharp sense of being in nature, right? That comes out to me. So that's it. I mean, I'm doing my walks and my jogs, and even my kettlebell stuff and all that, just outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
With it, I'm not going to get frostbite, right? Okay. But it is being as cold as I can stand. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm not.
Yeah. Right.
I'm not going to pretend like I'm doing this.
Yeah.
I live in Wisconsin. It's freezing here already.
Yeah, exactly.
How's
in Kansas than Wisconsin? Yeah.
Yeah. How's the weather in Rome right now, Eduardo?
It was raining today, so.
But not too frigid.
Yeah, it's usual. Fall. Yeah. So. It's okay.
All right, Eduardo, before we go, tell people tell the gentle listeners where they can find your stream, your music, all that good stuff.
I think they just the easiest way is to Google Nanowar of Steel or just look for Norwegian reggaeton. So they can catch us if they look on that. they look for this song, so it's our biggest hit, and
right.
I think it's the easiest way.
I'll be sure to link it in the show notes afterwards.
No worries.
Yeah. All right. Somebody asked. They're desperate for an answer on this. We'll see if we can help you out. Could you please comment on my question on presuppositional apologetics? Where is that? Could you comment on the primacy of metaphysics and epistemology in light of presuppositionalists like Von Til who have criticized natural theology? Yeah. What do you think about that, Jim?
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, you'd have to sort of specify that for me. Is the idea that we can't do metaphysics before we get our epistemology straight, or vice versa? I'll tell you what, Julio, if you want to write me an email, pathfinderchroniclestrength.com, and add some meat to that question, I can make sure we add it to our next Friday live stream for you. Yeah,
I will say this has nothing to do with it, but just one of the first things I published was a co-written. It was 2 co-written pieces that were an exchange with Van Til on intelligent design.
Oh yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, going way back. I mean, this is like 2002, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if someone's interested in Van Til, I have interacted with him. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so the way I see it. I mean, I'm not. I don't want to speak too quickly because I have not engaged Van Til that much. Yeah. I'm always worried about straw manning, right?
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. So just understand. I'm trying to be careful here. the way I see epistemological comparisons in worldviews, so I'm like a broadly Reedian guy with epistemology, right? I think we have to assume proper functionalism and that sort of thing. And then we can legitimately ask, well, without bringing in our probability assignments, because that's always tough, right? We can ask what background theory would better lead us to expect generally reliable cognitive faculties, stuff like that, right? I think that is a legitimate form of inquiry in worldview comparison, right? And if we have a background theory that just doesn't, that like, let's say this, all other considerations equal, if we have a background theory that would seem to favor or better predict cognitive reliability, I would say we should go with that background theory. Is how I would position that in worldview comparisons. I don't know if that answers your question at all, but that's just what came to my mind. Right. Mm-hmm. Cool. All right, we're going to close out here. Peace, people. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Go check out Nanowar Steel. Thanks, Eduardo, for joining us, and we'll catch you guys
Thanks for inviting.
next time.
I'm going to get some